Alert from Ob Studio. Creating a new live broadcast. Please wait.
Okay, I think I'm on. Please let me know in the chat if audio and visual are okay. Can you hear me? Can you see me? How are we doing? Are we connected? I'm not real sure. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, so we can start. I'm getting some positive feedback here. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, so we're continuing on with our tour of the realms of existence, and today we're going to deal with the human realm. I'm assuming probably most of you out there listening are human. Maybe I shouldn't make that assumption. The human realm is part of the sense desire sphere. So we share, as humans, we share many characteristics with the animals and with the devas. Once we get to the Brahmas, that's at an entirely different level. They're quite separate and different. But in the sense desire sphere, the default focus of consciousness and of thought and everything else is the product of the five senses, the five physical senses. This dominates our thinking, our feeling, and it's the centerpiece of existence in this realm. Although we can transcend that, that takes some effort. But the human realm has characteristic of being pretty much in the middle, which makes it an ideal birth for the attainment of enlightenment, because the lower realms are either too overwhelmed with suffering and or ignorance to make any substantial progress. They're in a helpless condition. The Deva realms are so pleasant and their existence is so long that they have trouble understanding the truths of dukkha and of anicca, suffering and impermanence. Although it's possible for a Deva to attain to the stage of stream winner, they don't go further than that. And human realm, or generally, to Sita heaven, there are some once returners. But the human realm is the only realm in which it's possible to attain full enlightenment. It's said that the humans of Jambudipa, that is and I'll get into this a bit more later, the different types of humans, but the humans of Jambudipa, which is the world island on which we live. So the ordinary humans, as we would understand them, have three characteristics in which they surpass even the Devas. And these are Sura, heroism; Satimant, mindfulness; and Ida Brahmacharya Vasa, the possibility of living the holy life to completion, that is, the ability to become enlightened. So we have those the optimum conditions for enlightenment, so a human rebirth, is considered very favorable or desirable. One way of expressing this is that we have in the human realm, we have a balance of suffering and of ease. Of course, the human conditions vary, and some humans have very wretched conditions, and some have very favorable conditions, uh, almost Dewa-like conditions. But for most humans, most of the time, there is their life is a mixture of pleasure and pain. So they have enough suffering to see that there's a problem. The First Noble Truth is evident in the human realm. But they also have enough ease and space in their life that they have some possibility of practice and of realizing the Dhamma. Also, unlike most of the animals, we have the power of speech. So anything that we learn, we can pass on, so it isn't lost generation by generation. Now, one thing I would notice, there's not really in that I've found anywhere a clear definition of what constitutes a human being. And this probably just simply was taken as self-evident. In our modern times, the questions may arise as to hypothetical possibilities, like, say, a being of a very different biology arising on another planet that has a human level of consciousness and understanding, where they class as human. I don't know if that's even a question that matters. The only place I think it could hypothetically come up is if an alien wanted to ordain in the Sangha. I don't think they could, because they wouldn't be biologically human, and that's one of the requirements which was put into, as I mentioned last time, to keep Nagas out. But it's pretty easy in modern terms to define what classifies as a human, at least in this world. We are members of a species with certain genetic characteristics that characterize us as human. Of course, there's a great variety within humans in terms of social position, of ethnicity, of gender, and so on. So there's quite a range of possibilities in taking a human rebirth, and some are much more favorable than others. But there are also, in the Buddhist cosmology, there are recognized different types of humans, let's say, that live on the other islands. Recall that the cosmology of, as seen in ancient India, was that the center of the world is the great mountain Sinaru, or Sumeru, and around that is a vast world ocean in which there are 4 islands that, relative to the whole, they're small, but they're thousands of yojanas across. And the whole world, the whole known world, is at the time, the world we live on, is Jambudipa, the southern island. It's triangular in shape with mountains in the north. So obviously it was modeled on India, which to the ancient Indians, India is kind of an island to itself. It's not very easy to travel by land, either east, north, or west from India. So it was perceived as in their imagination as an island. The other three islands have also human beings living on them, although they have some different characteristics. The island, the islands to the east and west, Puba Wedea and Apariogoyana, are not described in any great detail, although we're told that the only kind of detail we have is that the inhabitants of Apariogana do not build houses but live out of doors, so maybe that it means that they're very primitive. As for physical characteristics, there's some small mention of the difference in their faces. Those of us who live on Jambudipa have roughly triangular faces with broad foreheads and sharp chins. So those living on Apariogana have round faces. The folk of Uttara Kuru have square faces, and those of Puba Wedea have faces that resemble a half circle of a moon. So these shape of their face resembles the shape of the particular island. We do have, however, considerably more detail about Uttara Kuru. This is the northern island, directly opposite us on the other side of Sinaru. And that's described in two places in some detail, and the accounts are actually quite different from each other. There's an account in a sutta in the Digha Nikaya that talks about the Turakura being dominated by a class of powerful yakas that oppress the humans and use them as beasts of burden. And these yakas are said to live in floating cities, and they either hitch the humans to carts or they ride on their backs. So they use them as draft animals, basically. Although it's said in one of the commentaries, it's said that the humans that are oppressed by the yakas are not the inhabitants of Uttara Kuru, but the yakas seize them from Jambudipa, and only beings who don't keep the precepts well are susceptible to being seized by yakas. However, we have a totally different account in a sub-commentary that has a long description of Uttara Kuru as a kind of earthly paradise. And it's quite detailed, and it's very curious. They live in a kind of let's say primitive communism. They have no sense of private property. For example, when they go, if one of them wants to go swimming, he takes off his clothing and jumps into the river and swims as far as he likes, and then comes out of the river and walks along the bank until he finds a pile of clothes left by somebody else, and he puts it on and carries on his way. The economy is an economy of abundance in rather than scarcity, in that everything needful is provided by trees. Food and clothing and dwelling places are all produced in the trees. When they want to sleep at night, they find a tree that has a little bedroom built into its branches, and they go climb up there and sleep in there. They live. They have a fixed lifespan. They live exactly 1,000 years, and when they die without any pain. They just like going to sleep. And birds come and take away the body and drop it somewhere else, so that the island is not corrupted by corpses. Uh, they reproduce by they don't have they don't ordinarily have sensual desire. They're not troubled by lust. But once a month they have one day when they become lustful, and they seek out a partner for the night, and this is how they reproduce their species. But there's no sense of marriage, no possessiveness. The next day they just each separately carry on their way. And when a baby is born, this is a quite curious detail. It's in line with the sense of there being no suffering or pain in Uttara Kuru, physical illness. The baby is born quite easily without any stress for the mother. It just kind of drops out. And there's no trouble or care in raising the child. The mother's only duty is to make a little nest out of grass and leaves, and leave the baby in it by the side of the road and carry on and forget about him. And any passers-by give the baby a finger to suck on, and the finger produces milk. So this is how the baby lives. So Uttara Kuru is set up as a kind of opposite earthly paradise. But no one attains enlightenment on Uttara Kuru. There are only enlightened beings on Jambudipa. And it's another characteristic of the humans, in particular humans of Jambudipa, in that there is the possibility of Buddhas arising. So a Buddha is a type of a perfect human, of which there are two possibilities. Someone born with 32 marks is I'm trying to remember the Pali word. Let me I don't want to get it wrong. Let me just look here. Okay, I'm not finding it. Mahapurisa, yeah. Somehow I blanked on that. A Mahapurisa is a great human, or a perfect human. And they'll become either a Buddha or a Chakrawati, that is a wheel-turning monarch. These are the two types, the spiritual and the worldly or secular types of the perfect human, the Mahapurisa. And the mark, they're physically distinguished by having 32 marks on their body, which some of them are quite strange. Now, if this were taken literally, the Buddha would have had a quite unusual physical appearance, let us say. And it's a well-known story that when Bodhisattva was a baby, the wise men saw the 32 marks on his body and predicted he would be either a great king or a Buddha, and his father, being a worldly ruler, chose to raise him in luxury so he wouldn't see suffering. And of course he saw it when chariot rides in his youth, and saw sickness and death, and realized there is suffering in the world, and he ended up becoming a Buddha. So a Buddha is the most perfect type of being. Um, and that type only arises in the human realm. So this is another characteristic of the human realm, that there's a potentiality of arising as a Buddha. We could also mention here the lifespan of human beings is variable, and the tradition has it, or in the commentarial texts, that the over long eons of time, the average lifespans of humans varies greatly, and there's ascending and descending periods of time, and we're presently in a period of decline. The peak human lifespan is 80,000 years, and the minimum is 10 years. And it cycles back and forth in the course of a world system, cycles back and forth between these two extremes 18 times. So this is part of the Indian view of time as cyclical, and there's a rising and a falling in the world, and there's wheels within wheels. There's larger cycles that consume whole world systems and thousands of world systems, and there's shorter cycles that all the way down to the cycle of a day and night is the cycle. But these the human lifespan cycles go back and forth between 80,000 years and 10 years. Humans were said to arise in this world by a process of devolution, and this is a very interesting text, the Aganya Sutta, which has been studied and dissected by many different scholars. The many different interpretations of it. It's a very interesting text. It deals with how the beings that became humans were originally Abhisara Brahmas, but they became curious about the foam on the ocean of the earth as it congealed, and they tasted it with their fingers, and then they incorporated gross physical form into their organism, and they fell to the earth. And they gradually devolved into humans over long periods of time, for going through various stages that are enumerated in this text. So there is seen in the Buddhist vision, there is seen to be change over time. It doesn't work out in detail to be the same as evolution as understood by modern science, but neither is it a fixed origination in a perfect form as in creationist mythologies. So human beings being in the middle can be considered a precious rebirth, and this is something that's very much, this idea of the preciousness of human rebirth is something that's emphasized greatly in Tibetan Buddhism. There's a pair of contemplations in Tibetan Buddhism that are always taken together, is the horrors of samsara and the preciousness of human rebirth. And I would say both of these contemplations are found in the Theravada, but I've not seen them being explicitly paired in this way. It seems like a very natural pairing, complementary opposites. One often cited passage from, I think it's in the Samyutta, is to emphasize the preciousness of human rebirth, is the metaphor of the blind tortoise, which probably many of you will have heard, that once a being falls into the lower realms of existence, the opportunity to be reborn as human again is so rare that it can be compared to a blind tortoise at the bottom of the ocean that comes up for air once every 100 years, and if at that time he pokes his head through a yoke, then it's the same odds of being reborn human after once having fallen into the lower realms. So if you have the good fortune to be currently in a human form, make good use of your existence. Okay, so I'll stop there, and I can see the chat has been very busy. Let me get it to where I can read it easily. It comes in this tiny little font. I've got to blow it up. Okay. Let's see until scroll down until I get to some questions. Bante, in Theravada view, are all beings born in human realm naturally supplied with the potential to realize the unconditioned? That's a interesting question, and I don't see that as being definitively answered. I think certainly within one lifetime, I would say no. That there are certainly human beings that are born with some deficiency of intellect or in very unfortunate oppressive conditions that won't have any chance in this lifetime to realize the unconditioned. But as a theoretical potential, I think, yeah, it does exist in human beings. In fact, I would say it exists in all beings in a long time scale, because they can eventually take a favorable birth. I love the Uttara Kuru stories and that crazy thing like feeding babies with a finger. Yeah, that's very, very entertaining. How does one end up as yakas and asuras, as they seem more evil than humans, but for some reason are in a higher realm? Seems like weird karma. Yeah, it's definitely a mixed kind of karma to be in those sort of realms. I have heard it speculated that, and I think it makes sense to me, that to be born as an asura would be someone who's power hungry in this life, like a military leader or a politician, and then they'll become these power beings in the next life. That's a possibility. But it is a mixed karma, so there's good and bad mixed to be born in such a state. When arahants, etc., remember life from previous world systems, is the assumption they all appear as humans as do today, or is there any mention they are biologically different? Yeah, that's interesting. That there are, of course, in the Jatakas, numerous stories that take place in previous world systems. But here, the Indian cyclical view dominates. That we don't see in any sense that these worlds were fundamentally different than the one we know, even down to such details as the geography and the every previous world system had a Mount Sinaru and a Jambudvipa and even a Ganges Valley and a Varanasi and so on. And the humans were just described as we understand humans today. And I think that was the conception, that there were multiple, even infinite world systems, but they're not identical down to every detail, in that you'll find the same individuals, exactly the same situations, but they're broadly similar in that there's the same kind of a world, the same biology, and so on. Bante, do bad thoughts create negative karma, and if so, to what extent? Are they merely seeds for negative, unskilled actions, or do they express bad thoughts? Do unexpressed bad thoughts generate karma on their own? that karma actually, theoretically, in Abhidhamma, all karma is made at the level of thought. And when it's expressed by action, that's a kind of a secondary effect. There is good and bad karma associated with thought, but it's much less potent if it doesn't become expressed externally in speech or in action. But it is every thought has karma associated with it. What is your interpretation of these other human islands? Speculation, I know, but do you think they are other planets or dimension? What links them to us as humans? I think there's different ways of going with that. I think it's as a general point, I try and avoid the temptation to map the details of the ancient cosmology onto modern understanding. I don't think it really works. I think you have to take it at to sort of understand it and see how they pictured the world in ancient India, and they certainly didn't see them as other planets and so on. So I don't know if there is a literal reality to Uttara Kuru, or if it's possibly another dimension or another planet. These are possibilities, but I think it's all just kind of pointless speculation. I'm mostly interested in just understanding the system in its own terms. In Theravada view, is human referring to all of the genus Homo, such as H. Neanderthal, Homo erectus, or is it specifically referring to Homo sapien? Even then, are hunter-gatherers included, as they were Homo sapiens like us? So hypothetically, were they able to gain insight into the unconditioned? Well, it's sort of the question about Homo Neanderthal and Homo erectus is not really relevant, because they had no conception of that in ancient India. They had no idea of that. So they would not be, even considered one way or the other. Maybe a rough parallel would be the inhabitants of the other world islands, other species of human. And hunter-gatherers, Homo sapien, prior to the arrival of civilization, hypothetically, were they able to gain insight into unconditioned? Yes, of course, they're human beings. They could possibly have been Cro-Magnon Pachika Buddhas. I have no idea. There is of course, the tradition that there were 3 Buddhas prior to Siddhartha Gautama, and people have tried to speculate that into what is known of human early history and prehistory. It's possible that I think it's actually perhaps likely that Kassapa Buddha, the Buddha that existed before Siddhartha, may have lived in the Mohenjo-Daro civilization. There's also the possibility of very old civilizations that we know nothing of, that's been speculated on by people like Graham Hancock. Civilizations may have occurred in previous interglacial periods. There's a lot we don't know about early human history. How do you usually respond to practitioners with a scientific or material worldview who are resistant to accepting supernatural beings and powers? Well, I don't really find it fruitful to try and convince them otherwise. I kind of if that's their view, uh, they're going to find it limited. They're only going to be able to go so far into Buddhism before it becomes it becomes a fruitless endeavor. I'm certainly not as some teachers, try and come up with materialist versions to reach those people, but I'm not interested in doing that at all. In the Christian tradition, Jesus went to hell for 3 days and preached to those stuck there. The accounts of the Buddha or Arahants preaching the Dhamma in the hell realms. Not the Buddha, but there is a story about Moggallana, who went to Naraya hell and created a bubble of coolness, and beings came in this kind of bubble of outside of the fires of hell, and listened to his preaching. How does one end up with 32 Marshaka Chakrawada but not be a Buddha? Does that mean they were not a Bodhisattva in previous lives? That's interesting. I've not really seen any detailed accounts of previous lives of a Chakrawati. My guess is that they would have had a parallel development to a bodhisattva, in that they would have made an aspiration to become a Chakrawati in some previous life, and they practiced in that for that purpose. Is there a karmic reason for human beings meeting with car accidents? There's a karmic reason for everything. Everything we experience has some part of its causality is karma. Karma is not the only cause, but it's one cause. Multiple causes come together. For example, in the case of a car accident, might be faulty brakes, icy road, drunk driver in the other vehicle. Many types of causes, but the fact that you're there at that moment in that car and experience that accident, karma is one of the components of that. Is it a wake-up call? Yeah, it should. Everything that happens in a way is a wake-up call. When life suddenly gets serious, then we should learn something from that, in spite of the suffering involved. What do you think is larger, the size of the universe or human stupidity? I don't know if there's any common measuring, any common units of measure to determine that. How Buddha reflect a previous life, or maybe similar to lucid dream, or same technique, I guess. Well, the reflection of past lives came naturally to the Buddha because his mind completely open to all reality. But there are practices that can open up visions of past life, and it is somewhat similar to lucid dreaming. The Suddhimagga describes a process of developing your memory by recalling the details of this life backwards, starting with what you did today, then what you did yesterday and last month, and so on, trying to recall as many details as you can, and take it all the way back to early childhood, and then to your birth, and then through your birth to your previous life. It seems like a very demanding exercise. To be ordained is enough to have interest and intuition into core teachings, 3 characteristics, 4 truths, or is it necessary to believe literally? What are to us magical stories? No, it's not. It's not necessary, and I think it's actually. I think there are, let's say, two two extremes, as there often is. There's two extremes in approaching this kind of material. One is a naive literalism, which is quite ridiculous, and the other is to be a hard skeptic and not being able to appreciate the profundity and the beauty of this whole system by having a too rigid or fixed view of what is real, what is not. Now, when you ask, are the Dewa realms real, for example, what do you mean by real? And in what sense is your perception, this reality, this earth, real? Reality is a very slippery concept, and trying to take a firm stand one way or the other on these things is not productive. Is there any effect of black magic on humans that can cause unfortunate events in their life? Possibly. There is certainly, it's mentioned in the text as one of the even in the Vinaya, one of the ways of causing injury that's forbidden is through psychic power. I think it's possible, just as human beings can hurt each other by physical means, I think they can possibly do it by psychic means. Is smoking marijuana just to be calm, not to get high, breaking the precepts? Yeah, it would be a violation of the precept against taking intoxicants. The definition of intoxicant under that precept is any substance that could cause you to act in a heedless manner, and I think marijuana qualifies by that standard. Given the descent toward an age of 10 in a world destined to become engulfed by fire, are there incentives of the Nakama for making a difference as teacher counselor? Well, the world is going to decline to the age of 10, then it's going to rise up again. According to the story, up to the age of 80,000 years. It's up and down. We can't make our our judgments about what is worthwhile doing based on these long cycles of time. That's something beyond our control. Who is the most important or insightful Buddhist philosopher alive today? I don't know. I can think of some. I'm reluctant to name names because I'm going to leave somebody out and upset their devotees. But there are definitely some very very wise teachers, both amongst the Asians and also the Westerners. I would cite in our just to name one name, I would cite in our tradition Lumpur Samedo. Just to stay within the narrow focus of the Western Thai Sangha. How does the practice of metta influence rebirth? Does it count as a kind of dana? If metta is taken to perfection, it has a tendency to lead to rebirth in the jhana realms. If you get very good metta, the Brahma realms, you have a tendency to be reborn as a Brahma. Does it count as dana? No, it's different than dana, although I suppose it's similar in some aspects, but it's not classed as a kind of dana. Aren't Brahmas actually beings outside a sensual realm, formless? If so, how can they immediately conjure sense faculties and interact with surroundings that is purely sensual? They're not formless. They have physical bodies, although it's a subtle material. It's not hard, coarse material like here, but they do have bodies with limbs and heads and so on. It's said in the sutras they live in heavens with food and entertainment. No, you're mixing that up with the Devas. The Devas have food and entertainment. The Brahmas do not eat food. They subsist on jhanic bliss, self-generated, sort of what you might say chi energy or kundalini would be parallels, but like self-generated energy. And they don't eat. And they have sense faculties of sight and hearing that are functional for them, but they don't have desires related to that. They're not perfect. They have corruptions of pride and false view, and also desire for being. Would the Buddha pronounce his name Siddhartha or Siddhartha? Well, we don't know. It's the simplest answer. I mean, that Siddhartha is the Pali form, Siddhartha is the Sanskrit. Um, we don't even know really what dialect the Buddha would have grown up speaking in Rajagaha. It would have been quite different than the dialect in the Ganges Valley. So I'm not sure how the name was pronounced. Okay, let's I'll take one more question, and we'll call it for this session. Dear Ajahn, thank you for your teaching. Will you please explain the cause of demonic possession that is the subject of Catholic exorcism in the context of Buddhist cosmology? There are stories of yakas, kind of demonic beings that take possession of people. And it's only possible if the human being makes an opening for it by their own defilements. And I think petas also can possibly take temporary possession of a person. I think this is a lot of what is called channeling. Is powerful petas taking possession of someone for their own purposes, to enjoy the experience of having a fleshy form once again. Okay, so I think before we move on to the higher realms, I want to close up a bit of loose ends by dealing with some of the, and it may take more than 1 week to get through, I don't know yet, but there are a large number of types of beings in the cosmology that don't really fit into the neat scheme of the 5 jati. And I'm thinking of yakas, kanaras, asuras, and there's a few others. So we'll look at these sort of the beings that fall between the cracks next week. So I'll leave it there for now.